it's gonna be really challenging for you to like exaggerate, bring your knee forward and touch the patient. Okay, it's gonna feel awkward, and as soon as you stand up, your knee straightens and you pull your block away.
Okay.
Step past your patient's foot. Okay, so my heel should be almost next to her heel. That way when I cross, I can put light pressure on her. I'm not jamming my shin into her to where she can't stand up. But if you cross your, or if you step past the patient's foot, now I can get into like a squatted position. I'm not up over her where she can't stand, and I can just weight shift back, but my knee stays in place. Okay, that's the main fix whenever you can't maintain that block. So when you stand up, there should not be this big gap between your two shins, because if that happens, you're no longer able to safely block that patient. If they were to buckle, you may think, oh, I can get there pretty quick, but they're gonna be on the floor if they actually buckle. Okay, so it doesn't have to be a lot of pressure on the patient, it should just be light. That way they can move, you don't feel like you're hindering them, and that just comes with practice. Okay, the other thing is, when the patient's moving, pivoting to bed, it should be like a weight shift, unweight, kind of like a penguin. They should look kind of like this, and you're mimicking that. So, put my hands on the gate belt. I'm here. We're gonna stand up on 3. 1, 2, 3. I'm just weight shifting back, and then we're gonna rock.
Okay, slow down.
Good.
See.
And then reach back, and she's sitting. And so my shin never came off of hers. It's kind of like a dance. You're kind of rocking back and forth. You're watching when that patient goes to bring that affected leg back, you're advancing. It just comes with practice. Now if your standardized patient does something wonky and they like do one of these on you and you're not ready for it, I'm not gonna ding you for that, okay? I'm understanding, but I just wanna see that you know that block needs to stay. Any other issues, things that are challenging? I think another issue that I see there, regardless of the foot positions, like your foot should be past the patient's foot. You want to weight shift away from your patient. Get out of their space, because if you stay up over top of them, they may try to stand up, but you're pushing them back down. So kind of weight shift back. You should stay squatted. That's going to allow you to keep that knee forward without extending the knee and pulling your block off the patients.
She said.
All right, what are the differences going back to the wheelchair? A couple groups got to try it.
The leg rests have to be positioned in the wheelchair when you're actually getting back into the chair.
Leg rest, that's the only difference. Wheelchair should be in the same position across the room. They need to be within reach. That way, as soon as I transfer her to the wheelchair, I need to stay in front of the patient, right? Until those leg rests go back on. So I can't leave them over here, because as soon as I step away, she can potentially fall out, okay? So if I were transferring her here to this chair, obviously these would be off. I would probably leave them back by the drive wheel. That way they weren't gonna trip us up, but while we're here, I can grab them, put them back on, and then we'd be done with the practical. But other than that, there's no difference. The chair is still at a 45-degree angle. We're still doing those pivoting steps. We're still going towards what side?
Strong side.
Strong
Unaffected.
side. Okay, so some of you practiced right, what we just did here, her left leg was affected. Same patient, if I was getting her back to the wheelchair, what would I have to change?
Wheelchair position to the opposite.
Wheelchair position, right? Because right now her left leg's affected. We don't transfer to the weak side if we can help it. So I'd move that chair to this side, transfer to the strong side when possible, okay? Alternatively, you could also do the same direction, but opposite side of the bed. All right, anybody need to see bed back to wheelchair or come keep going? Left leg still affected.
Could we see it with the right leg affected?
Sure, yes. So right leg's affected, you made my life easier. Wheelchair's gonna stay here, okay? Had it not been that way, I would have moved the chair around.
Oh. I don't know what's, I don't know.
You're good.
Yeah.
No, if you hit right leg, then you do right leg. Okay? So footrests are gonna be out of the way. The thing that changes here is, can I leave my patient seated edge of bed and go set up my room,
No.
make sure it's nice and pretty? No. So I need to do this while she's in bed. Okay? If you don't mind laying down. And you might take the gate belt off. I will also go through how to put the belt on in the bed. Because We agreed once we sit the patient up edge of bed, we have to have at least one point of trunk contact at all times until they're seated in the wheelchair, scooted back. Okay? And until someone figures out how to one-handed lasso a gait belt around somebody, we're gonna have to do it in the bed. Okay, that's okay. So for bed mobility, we'd have the bed at therapist height. For the transfer, the bed height is based on who? Patient, right? So I want the bed to be low enough so that her feet touch the floor. If you're exceptionally tall, we don't want your knees above your hips where the bed's too low. We want it to feel natural, like you're standing up out of a chair. Okay? If we're putting this belt around the patient, they are allowed to arch their back to allow you to slide the belt behind them. Just make sure you're doing it the right way. So if we have the teeth here, teeth need to be on the inside of the circle, like this. You're always gonna put the smooth end under the patient, not the buckle, for obvious reasons. Go ahead and cross your arms. I'm just gonna palm facing down, slide it behind the patient. You got the biggest belt.
Sorry. For the little person.
So, go like this, down low. Feel okay? So you can put the belt on the patient while they're supine in bed, okay? If they were prone, do the same way. And I'm gonna tuck the excess. Through here, so it's out of the way. So definitely do that before you start moving the patient. If you start rolling and not yet, you can, if they're in sideline, I'll let you say, I have the tech maintain trunk contact and I'll let you put it on. Since we gave you that wiggle room when you're walking around the bed, we'll let you do it there. But ideally, it's the first thing I do. When I walk in the room, we hand sanitize, we make sure bed, wheelchair are locked, and make sure the belt goes on the patient. That way you don't get stuck later. Because if you sit them up and have forgotten the belt, it's gonna be a lot more time consuming to lay them back down, put the belt on and do it again, right? So belt is on my patient. We said right leg affected. So right leg affected, we've got strength in all three extremities except for the affected one. So what bed mobility will I choose?
Modified scoop.
How many legs are affected?
You can do
One. Oh, one.
Just one,
long
right?
sit.
So
Long
orthopedic
sit.
case, one leg's affected, it's gonna be the long
Long
sit,
walk.
the easiest of them. So she's in bed, bed rails are up, we're safe. I need to set up my environment so that everything's accessible to me. So I need to make sure these are accessible, but not in my way. I'm gonna put them here. So I know, okay, when we sit up here, I can still reach them, but I'm not gonna trip. Wheelchair, can I leave it here?
No.
No, because her feet will hit it, okay? So wheelchair needs to be unlocked. Within reach, so I can pull it into position. Okay, this is where it differs. You have to plan ahead and have the chair prepared. Okay? So I'm gonna take the pillow away from you. And on the trunk, go ahead and come up onto your elbows. Up onto your hands, face your fingers behind you. Okay. I'm on my patient's affected side. Go ahead and bend this leg. I'm gonna support this one. We're gonna go at your speed. Pivot towards me. Okay, I'm gonna let your knee bend. Okay, we're seated here. I'm gonna keep trunk contact. Lower us down to her height. I want her feet to touch the floor.
She's on the floor.
A few moments later.
All right, so she's scooted pretty far back on the bed. Just like the wheelchair, I want the first thing we do is for her to scoot forward. I'm gonna move the wheelchair into position first. That hand's not gonna move. So we're here. Right side's affected, moving towards the strong side. I'm gonna lock our wheelchair. I'm gonna turn our caster wheels. One hand sanitize. And then I'm gonna be blocking the right leg, okay? I like the caster wheels facing out right now because this area gets a lot smaller if you put a caster wheel in the way. And especially if you have larger feet or if your patient has larger feet. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and scoot forward. She is able to do this. Some patients that we'll work with are not, and we'll learn how to scoot them forward, okay? So we're gonna turn your foot like this. I'm gonna block here. Okay, my foot, see, is past hers. My knee is on the inside, I'm blocking her. Gait belt, gait belt. We're gonna stand on 3. 1, 2, 3, out. Okay. And we're just gonna take pivoting steps. Reach back, you can sit. You squatting down with the patient allows their knee to bend. If you don't, you're gonna constantly be blocking them and they're not gonna sit. Okay, now that she is back in the chair, my hands can come off of her. I just have to put the footrest on. I'm gonna do the one that's easiest, that way I don't have to manage 2 legs. This leg's unaffected, you can have her go ahead and lift your leg. Unlock, you're gonna support the affected leg to pivot. Relock the chair.
I have a question. Question.
Yes, sir.
When you transfer from the bed to the wheelchair, you block the unaffected side, and when you go to the bed, you block the side that's affected.
Nope, the affected side actually changed right here.
Oh,
So we just did the right side affected right now. So you're always blocking the affected side.
okay.
Yeah, so that's neutral, right? So toes have to stay forward or even out. Yes,
So how would you roll this patient over if they can't?
right.
Put
So
a
hip-
pillow
hip-
between their knees.
Okay.
So if you had to roll, yes, you'd put a pillow between your knees, trying to keep, or you'd have a designated person on that leg to stop those toes from turning in.
Sure.
That hip internal rotation. Ideally, we're not rolling them. If they're bed level and they're doing like using a bedpan or something, you're gonna have to roll, which is a consideration. You have to keep in mind for us, a typical total hip patient, what bed mobility technique would you choose?
The long set.
Long
But
sit,
not-
right? So that way there's no
yeah,
rolling, it makes it
yeah.
simpler. That's why your hand is on the affected leg to stop it from rotating while we're moving to the side of the bed.
And then just not all the way up to 90 degrees?
Right, and that's why you have that hand
leg kick
on the
out.
patient's trunk,
Mm.
and that front side of your palm is to keep them from coming forward too far. And that's why we instruct them to lean back on their hands. So once they come to edge of
Leg
bed,
out.
I want them propped back on their hands. Here is okay, but knowing patients, I want them here. It gives us a little bit more wiggle room in case they decide to move, instead of them here and they, boom, have already broken it very quickly. Okay, so always have them resting back on their hands. Okay? Once they're in the wheelchair, they are okay to scoot back. 90 degrees is acceptable. We just want to make sure this isn't jacked up like that, or they don't lean forward. Okay, so let's do a with FWW. What does FWW stand for?
Four-wheel.
Front wheeled walker, yeah. So the 4-wheeled walkers are the rollators back there. We'll go through them in the second half of this class, but we won't utilize them for our competencies, just because it's a very high level patient that you would ever want to give that to, so we don't really use it here. So FWW, front wheeled walker, also called a 2-wheeled walker. So let's go grab one per group. And if someone wants to grab you one for demo,